The file on Veth Compliance Overseer Keth Narrell's desk was thinner than she would have liked. 3 personnel records, a species intake assessment stamped preliminary, and a note from the Galactic Accord Integration Board that read, in the dry bureaucratic language she had spent 20 years learning to decode, "We are uncertain how to classify them. Please advise." She had been advising the Integration Board for 2 decades. She had shepherded 41 species through the Accord's compliance testing program. She had seen the full range of what sentient life could produce under duress, valor, catastrophic failure, things that did not have clean names in any language. She had thought by now that she had seen most of it. She pulled up the species assessment. Homo sapiens. Oxygen-dependent biped. Native gravity 9.8 ms squared. No redundant organ systems, no dermal plating, no venom glands, no echolocation, no natural temperature regulation beyond perspiration and shivering. Average lifespan approximately 80 standard years before systems failure. Skeletal structure calcium phosphate compound, rated adequate for native gravity load, no additional stress tolerance. She read the physical profile and felt what she recognized after 20 years as professional pity. They were soft. They were fragile. By every metric the Integration Board used to assess compliance suitability, they should not have survived long enough to develop spaceflight. The last line of the assessment was a notation added by the field analyst who had compiled it. She read it twice. It said, "Subject species has a recorded history of voluntarily entering conditions identical to Karathdur-class environments for recreational purposes." Keth Narell set the file down. She looked at her window, which showed the gray-green orbital cloud deck of the compliance station. Then she looked back at the file. She made a note on the intake form. Recommend full phase deployment. Rationale: standard graduated protocol likely insufficient. She was wrong about this, but not in the direction she expected. The planet had a designation in the Veth Administrative Catalog, GX7 Tertiary, and a common name that most species encountered it under only once. Karathdur translated in the old Veth dialect that the Integration Board still used for official designations, to the grinding place. It was not subtle naming. The atmosphere was a nitrogen-heavy mix with trace sulfur dioxide that irritated mammalian respiratory tissue after approximately 6 hours of sustained exposure. The gravity was 1.35 standard, not immediately incapacitating, but relentless, a slow accumulation of demand on every muscle system that compounded hour by hour. The soil was a dense waterlogged clay that clung to boots and equipment and added meaningful resistance to every step. Average surface temperature, 4 degrees above freezing during the day cycle, -18 at night. The indigenous fauna were the planet's primary compliance mechanism. The Veth's xenobiologists had spent considerable effort over the centuries selecting which species to maintain in the compliance testing zones, calibrating the ecosystem for maximum psychological impact. The apex predators, creatures the Veth catalog listed as Veth Core, meaning judgment beasts, were not the most dangerous animals on the planet. They were the most visible. 6-limbed, heavily muscled, with sensory equipment tuned for thermal detection and vibration. Their role in the compliance ecosystem was to be frightening. Below the surface, the real mechanism waited. The deeping swarms were colonial insectoids, each individual unit approximately 20 centimeters long with mandibles rated for 1,700 newtons of bite force, sufficient to penetrate standard coalition combat armor up to grade 4. They nested in the waterlogged substrate and surfaced in response to seismic vibration above a certain threshold. The threshold had been calibrated precisely. It corresponded to the vibration produced by approximately 3 to 5 medium-mass bipeds under full gear load moving across the surface. The deeping swarms were not released. They were triggered. The distinction mattered because it meant the compliance candidates triggered them themselves through the simple act of existing on the surface. In 47 years of operation, 17 species had been cycled through Karathdur. 11 had requested emergency extraction within 24 hours. 4 had lasted 72 hours before environmental stress produced the psychological collapse the program was designed to measure. 2 had lasted the full scheduled evaluation period of 120 hours. Both of those species were now senior members of the Galactic Accord military framework, deployed in conditions their home environments had not prepared them for but which Kareth-Dur had. Keth Narl believed in the program. It was brutal, and it was effective, and those two things had never struck her as contradictory. She watched the drop capsule enter the atmosphere on her monitoring feed and thought, 48 hours. That is my estimate for this cohort. She was off by approximately 115 hours. The three humans who stepped out of the drop capsule were named Sergeant First Class Dara Okafor, Corporal Jesse Brandt, and Private First Class Thomas Reinhold. Their personnel files described them, respectively, as Infantry, 13 years service, 4 prior combat deployments, Combat Medic, 7 years service, Specialist in Field Surgery under non-sterile conditions, Combat Engineer, 3 years service, disciplinary record that the Integration Intake Officer had summarized as creative. Keth Narl watched them on the monitoring feed. The first thing the gravity did was hit them. Okafor's knees buckled slightly. Brandt grabbed the capsule hatch frame. Reinhold bent forward at the waist, hands on thighs, and made a sound that the audio feed's translation matrix rendered as a compound of complaint and greeting, directed at no one in particular. The second thing that happened was the rain. Kareth-Dur's precipitation was mildly acidic, pH 4.2, sufficient to degrade ablative surface coatings over extended exposure and to produce a persistent, uncomfortable prickling sensation on any exposed skin. The rain began approximately 90 seconds after the drop capsule landed, as it reliably did during this atmospheric cycle. Reinhold looked up at the sky. He was getting rained on. He said something. The translation matrix, which had been preloaded with English, rendered it as, "Of course." Then he laughed. Keth Narl noted this on her observation log with a question mark. Okafor was already moving. His body language did not suggest fear or disorientation. It suggested assessment. He was scanning the terrain, turning slowly, cataloging. Brandt was checking the capsule's equipment manifest. Reinhold, still apparently amused by something, was helping her. Okafor spoke. The translation matrix caught it. Ridgeline at bearing 270. We get above this muck before dark, we can see the swamp approaches. Move. They moved. Keth Narl watched them begin to climb. Their biometric feeds showed elevated cortisol, elevated heart rate, elevated respiratory load. The numbers were in the range she expected. What she did not expect was the trajectory of those numbers over the following 2 hours, as the humans climbed a 40-meter ridgeline in 1.35 gravity while carrying 40 kilograms of equipment each. The numbers did not climb toward